An advisor to the Ukrainian presidency says that Europe needs to increase its military support to his country and that Moscow needs to be further isolated on the world stage.
The president of Cyprus accuses Brussels of having double standards when it comes to its neighbour, Turkey.
Russia's defense ministry has confirmed that its troops continued to launch long-range airstrikes on Ukraine's military and energy infrastructure on Tuesday. In a statement, it said, quote, "The purpose of the strike has been achieved. All designated facilities have been hit," unquote. Let's take a look at the situation in Ukraine now. An attack on the energy facilities in Lviv, this is western Ukraine, left large parts of the city without electricity for the second day following recovery efforts overnight. In Vinnytsia region, right here, the Ladizhin thermal power plant was struck. Energy infrastructure has been struck and damaged in Ukraine's central eastern Dnipropetrovsk region. And in Zaporizhia, in the southeast, Russia fired at least 12 rockets targeting an educational institution, a medical institution and residential buildings. Zaporizhia has been bombarded more than most cities in recent days. Missiles and drones have been shot down in Kyiv, Odessa, Mykolaiv and in other regions. The Institute for the Study of War says in its Monday attacks, Russia wasted some of its dwindling precision weapons against civilian targets as opposed to military significant targets. The Ukrainian main military intelligence directorate also reported that Putin has been planning this attack prior to the Kerch Strait bridge explosion, and if true, this could indicate that Putin planned this attack for the deflection of the Kharkiv-Izium Liman failures. As of the 10th of October, Ukrainian forces have likely liberated over 200 square kilometers of territory in the region of Luhansk. The Institute for the Study of War says Russian attacks on the Ukrainian energy grid will not likely break Ukraine's will to fight, but Russia's use of its limited supply of precision weapons in this role may deprive Putin of options to disrupt ongoing Ukrainian counteroffensive operations in the regions of Luhansk and Kherson.
With Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities coming under intensive Russian airstrikes, a senior advisor to Ukraine's president has told Euronews that Europe needs to increase its military support to his country. And he argues that the recent bombings showed that Ukraine urgently needs air defense systems promised by European countries.
It's shocking to see that a lot of Western states are still ruminating on weapon supplies and on whether they should provide air defense systems. The Germans, for example, have promised a very modern air defense system for months. It was apparently in production, but how many more times are they going to announce it? We need more air defense system, and hopefully that's going to happen now.
He also called for Russia to be further isolated on the world stage.
We need to classify Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. That's a very important step. It's not just symbolic, it will also affect Russia's trade capacities and the way they are just perceived economically in the world. We need to think outside of the box in terms of how to destabilize Russia's regime from within, because that's the ultimate solution. Russia still has the capacity internally to focus all of their efforts and all of their attention on foreign policy as they perceive it. Now, we need to stop them from doing that. We need to deprive them of the ability and the resources to do that. They need to focus on themselves, and there's plenty to deal with inside of Russia.
The president of Cyprus is accusing the European Union of having double standards when it comes to Turkey. In an interview with Euronews, Nikos Anastasiades says that Ankara is the only NATO member state not to have signed up to sanctions against Russia. Exports from Turkey to Moscow have also soared since the Ukrainian invasion began. The Cypriot president is furious that despite the fact that the EU's own economies are impacted by the sanctions, Turkey is allowed to work in its own interests and even help Moscow to circumvent the sanctions.
Αντί να επικεντρώνουν την προσοχή τους σε αυτά που δεν
Instead of focusing their attention on those that will not have a direct impact on the Russian market, it would have been better to see which of the countries, either candidates for membership or even neighboring countries, belonging to the European political family, are not implementing any of the sanctions. And I will be more specific. I am talking about Turkey, which in fact facilitates products such as Russian steel to be exported to Europe through Turkey.
ώστε προϊόντα όπως είναι ατσάλι κλπ, ρωσικό ατσάλι, να εξάγεται στην Ευρώπη μέσω της Τουρκίας.
The president of Cyprus also says Brussels is not doing enough to stop the extreme rhetoric and behaviour by Turkish President Erdogan against his country. He warns the risk of another conflict within Europe is right there.
Δεν είναι δυνατόν να επιδιώκουμε ή να λέμε.
It is not possible to condemn Russia for violating international law. But when international law is violated by a candidate country that wants to join the EU against members of it, like Turkey, we pretend that we do not understand the importance. It is this tolerance that encourages Turkey and creates the risk of a new conflict within Europe.
Αυτή η ανοχή είναι που αποθρασύνει και δημιουργεί τους κινδύνους μιας νέας εντός της Ευρώπης σύραξης.
The island of Cyprus has been divided since 1974 when Turkey invaded the north in response to a brief Greek-inspired coup. Since then, efforts at reunification have been made but without any tangible results. And now tensions are high as Ankara is saying that it could send military material to the island as it needs to be protected.
Thousands are protesting in Haiti's capital after its Prime Minister, Ariel Henry, asked for the international community to deploy armed forces in the country. The request comes after several weeks of violent demonstrations that were sparked by an announcement that fuel prices would increase.
This request is an unconstitutional act. This is an act against the state. It is an action against the Haitian people's demands, who want a free country where everyone can eat, have health care, and live like human beings.
Several people have been shot and one person has been killed during the demonstrations that are also calling for the Prime Minister to resign. Many are against the idea of UN peacekeepers in the country, as they have previously been accused of sexual assault and sparking a cholera epidemic that killed around 10,000 people a decade ago. And now the devastating illness could make a comeback in the America's poorest country, as an outbreak has already been reported.
We urgently appeal for funds from the international community to address the cholera outbreak, as well as other pressing humanitarian needs in the country.
The cases were in the southern part of Port-au-Prince, where thousands of people live in cramped and unsanitary conditions. The United States has also responded to the Prime Minister's request, and it said over the weekend that it was considering sending support to the country.
In Romania, bread isn't the only thing on the rise. As the country grapples with economic downturn, bakers here are having to up their prices to stay in business. Like most European countries, soaring inflation and sky-high energy costs have reduced the country's purchasing power. According to statistics, bread prices in Europe have increased by 18%, but in Romania, prices have shot up by almost a quarter.
A normal loaf of bread costs just under 60 cents. I find it very expensive because many people can no longer afford to buy their daily bread. And the purchasing power is very, very low. I don't know what's happening, but the situation is quite difficult.
Last year it was around 40 cents. But people got used to the idea that everything is expensive.
The average monthly salary in Romania amounts to just €800. Experts say its comparatively low wages are exacerbating the country's woes.
Currently, the price only really covers the costs. So if we refer to the example of simple white bread hasn't been making profit for a year. So from that point of view, bakers are in survival mode. A miller in Romania who makes flour for bread doesn't buy wheat cheaper than a miller in France. The significant difference in terms of costs is in the wages. The wages in Romania are lower than those in France.
The average Romanian consumes around 7 kilograms of bread per month. But growing cost of living concerns could force residents to cut down on their white and brown.